Welcome back, everybody. This is our final edition, our final video in the video series, Missouri Government, How Does It Work? We're talking about the judicial branch. I know if you're watching these videos back to back to back, it might seem like this is going on a while, but this is our last discussion, our last branch to talk about. So let's get to it. At the top of the Missouri judicial branch is the Missouri Supreme Court. It's a little bit different than the National Supreme Court. There are only 7 judges, and instead of serving life terms, they serve 12-year terms before they have to get reelected. Missouri also has kind of a different system for electing our Supreme Court judges. Instead of the president nominating and the Senate approving, it is a special plan that's called the Missouri Plan. 12 other states, I believe at this point, are using the Missouri Plan, and the basic explanation is that the governor gets to appoint some people in a special appellate judicial commission. I'm sorry, let me back that up. The appellate judicial commission submits the name of 3 people to the governor. The governor picks one of those 3 people, and then that person runs for election. So it's kind of a 3-step process, but all you really need to know for the Constitution test is that we use something different called the Missouri Plan, and it's not as simple as the National Supreme Court. Now, what can they talk about? They can talk about how U.S. laws are applied in Missouri, or they can talk about Missouri's laws. So, should a U.S. law or treaty apply to Missouri? The state government can decide on that, and then if the national government still has an issue with it, then they could either sue Missouri or sue people who broke that law, and it would go to the Supreme Court of the United States. They get to decide whether or not Missouri's statutes or the Missouri Constitution is legal. They decide our revenue laws and whether or not they're constitutional, and they also get to decide if there is an argument about who won an election. The Missouri Supreme Court gets to decide who won that election. Finally, they get to decide the death penalty. Now, we've mentioned this before. In your notes it says, does the state currently allow the death penalty? Yes. Yes, it does. Currently, we do have it legal here in Missouri. We are in the minority of the states that allow it, but currently Missouri does. Now, the Missouri Supreme Court is not the only court system in Missouri. There are 3 different levels. Okay, at the top is the Supreme Court, in the middle is the Court of Appeals, and in the bottom is called the Circuit Courts. At the bottom is where you start if you're being sued or suing someone else. Again, they see criminal trials. If someone is unhappy with the outcome of the criminal trial, then they can try to go to the Court of Appeals and say, my evidence was handled wrong, or this witness lied. And if the Court of Appeals takes their case, then they can have kind of a redo almost of their original case. And then finally, if you're still unhappy with the Court of Appeals, you can go to the Missouri Supreme Court, and you can say, not only did somebody get it wrong the first time, but they got it wrong the second time, and here's why. And the Supreme Court can decide whether or not they want to hear your case. Now, in your notes it says, are there any appeals after the Missouri Supreme Court? What do you think? If you're unhappy with the Missouri Supreme Court, is there anywhere else left to go? Yes, there is. You can go up to the U.S. Supreme Court. So you can go from the Missouri Supreme Court to the U.S. Supreme Court. So you could even go to one further than this. Now, there are other courts too. Municipal courts are people who deal with traffic courts, things like parking tickets, speeding tickets. Housing courts might be an issue if you're having a dispute over a border in between you and your neighbor's house, or kind of repeated issues with a landlord. That would go to housing court. Small claims court is where you can go if you're going to file a claim against someone who owes you money. Maybe a roommate hasn't paid you rent in a while. Maybe someone borrowed your car and then crashed it and refused to pay you. If you guys are familiar with Judge Judy, Judge Joe Brown, Maybe you're sick at home one day, turn on TV, one of those people will probably be on that small claims court. All right, now, if someone is charged with a crime, there are basically two ways that court case could shake out. The first thing that would happen would be a grand jury. A grand jury does not decide if somebody is guilty or not guilty. A grand jury is typically made of a higher number of people, closer to 20, and they decide whether there's enough evidence for a trial. Okay? If you remember back to the summer of 2014, the nights that the protests broke out after the Ferguson verdict, that was because a grand jury said there wasn't enough evidence to prosecute the police officer, and a lot of people were upset about that. Again, the grand jury didn't say the police officer was innocent, they said that there wasn't enough evidence to have a trial. Now, the next thing that would happen if the grand jury is used and finds there's enough evidence is that a trial jury or a trial by jury would occur. And this is what you usually think of when you see it on TV or in the movies. These are a group of people who listen to evidence, who listen to lawyers, and then have to decide if somebody is guilty or not guilty. One more thing before we leave this page, I want to mention that grand juries are not used every time. As a matter of fact, they're kind of rare. So grand juries only happen occasionally. Okay. If you're ever called to be a juror, someone to be on a jury, you have to be 21 years old, so you guys have a little while before you have to be concerned with that. You have to be a resident of the county that you live in. So, for example, when I was in college, I got called for jury duty, and I called them up and said that I don't live in that county right now, and they said I don't have to come. There is a urban legend that you have to be a registered voter to be called as a juror, and some people don't register to vote because they don't want to be on jury duty, but that's just a myth. You do not have to be a registered voter. Anybody can be called to be on jury duty in Missouri. Okay, that brings us to the end of our series here. Thank you guys so much for watching. Again, if you need to go back and watch these before the big test, if you need to maybe watch one of the three, maybe you don't know that much, not feeling as comfortable about executive branch, you can go back and watch that. That's one of the reasons why I made this into 3 videos. So, good luck on your test. I hope you do excellent. And if you have any questions, feel free to talk to me in class or email me. Thanks. Bye.